Come, spellweavers, reavers, rogues, and men-at-arms, and answer the call of adventure. Pick up your sword, your axe, your spellbook, your bow, your rulebook, and your dice, and join the forces of good in their eternal fight against vile monsters, conspiring min-maxers, horny bards, and blood-soaked murder hobos. Discover the treasure trove of role-playing games here on Rollin Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide. Good evening, Boneheads, and welcome back to Rollin Bones with Ryan Howard, where we are making old school young again. I'm your host and king of the Boneheads, Ryan Howard, and tonight I am joined once again by a three-time guest on Rollin Bones. He is the mind behind Chronicles of Iris, Dueling Dragon Adventures, and now this forthcoming Titans of Fallen Earth, which has fully funded on Kickstarter. He is the one and only Greg Lambert, a great guy, a good friend, someone who I love talking to. And if our last conversation is anything to go off of, this is going to be awesome tonight. So I am excited to bring Greg on and talk a lot about this project. He's been working on it for a long, long time. I know he's excited about it. So I'm not going to spend too much time on my nonsense. But of course, want to remind everyone to like, share, and subscribe. That is the best way to support not only what I'm doing here, but when I have a guest like Greg on who, let's face it, Greg is completely underrated as a game designer. I want more people out there to see what he's working on. I want, to push this Kickstarter of his to the moon. And the best way to do that is for all of you out there who are watching to hit that like button, leave a comment, share this video with your friends, and tell them how awesome Greg's project is. That's ultimately what I want to do here. Get the word out more than it already is that this thing is the bomb, or thebomb.com, as they said in the 1990s. Also want to remind everyone that you can find me on various social media platforms, including X and Instagram at Howard_Ryan Greg. YouTube is Rollin Bones. Twitch is twitch.tv/RollinBonesRyan. And Substack is rollinbones.substack.com. I have an article that is available as of last week called Mo Money, Mo Problems, pretty much about why you should be using domain play. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can find that over on Substack. Well, that's enough of my shilling here. So let's go ahead and bring on the man who's got this amazing project that he's been talking about for a couple of years at this point. So welcome back to Rollin Bones from Dueling Dragon Adventures, Mr. Greg Lambert. Welcome back, Greg.
Hello, how's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good. How you doing?
Good. Last time I was on, our video was fantasy must be conservative. That's that's not a milquetoast take by any stretch of the imagination.
No, that is pretty substantial as far as the controversy meter is concerned. So I honestly, I have similar questions about this particular genre and kind of the philosophical underpinnings of it, which might sound unusual to some of you out there, but I think there is more to this particular genre than just giant monsters and robots punching each other. But before we get into that, I do, for the benefit of everyone out there who is not familiar with this project, just want to play a video clip that Greg shared with me, just kind of let you all know what this project is all about. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring up the trailer for Titans of Fallen Earth.
The world ended in a sea of fire on September 1st, 1989. The bombs took out more of us than of them. There are survivors crawling through the ruins, trapped by endless storms of smoke and ash. Now those things are coming back, just like they did before. But this time, we'll be waiting. This time, we can stop them.
Sweet.
All right, so that's awesome. That, like, honestly, that is a great trailer.
Oh, thank you. So it's definitely a multifaceted game.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and there's a lot of cool stuff to to extract from that particular trailer. One that I just want to tee up for you here right away, because I know that the answer to this is going to be interesting. When the uneducated eye or the outside eye takes a look at this, one of the first questions they're going to have is, well, hey, this looks pretty similar to Lancer. So what is your response?
No! Now he's just trolling with me. He's fucking with me now. There's no question about it. He knows it's not like Lancer. Lancer is the magic school bus to this Terminator game.
Gotcha. So,
no,
for those of you who are unaware, Greg is not the biggest fan of Lancer, and there are a number of reasons to not be a big fan of Lancer, if I'm being perfectly honest. So, I guess to kind of open that conversation there, Lancer is kind of there are two games that are kind of the go-to for people who want a mech-focused RPG right now. There's Rifts is the big one that comes to mind. We're going to set that off to the side right now, because if we talk about Rifts, then we're going to be completely afield of my actual knowledge of RPGs. Let's focus on Lancer here. What is it about Lancer that you feel underserves this particular genre, that you feel Titans of Fallen Earth kind of picks up where Lancer has dropped the ball?
Well, I think Lancer is there and has been there for years as a stand-in, because there simply isn't anything else. Of course, there's BattleTech and Mech Zeta and a few other things like that. But as far as the type of role-playing experience at the table for building your mech and pilot and going on missions and sorties and things like that, Lancer just has been there. But for an average guy, let's say like Dunder Moose over here, who is looking for a hardcore humanity on the brink of total annihilation, and we have to fight in order to cancel the apocalypse, as Idris Elba says in Pacific Rim, and it's got a hard and gritty tone of survival against all odds in a post-apocalyptic world that's reminiscent of Terminator. You know, all the good stuff that we grew up with in the 80s, the action heroes, the vision of a bleak future scorched by nuclear war that can be overcome with human resilience. That entire vibe and atmosphere is missing from Lancer. Lancer is Star Trek: The Next Generation. It's a utopia, communist kind of utopia, where not everyone is holding hands and singing Kumbaya, but it's just, it has that thread running throughout it that is not the type of like hardcore like themes that someone might be looking for. Now my goal was to put something on the shelf where if someone like Dunder Moose goes into the store, local game store, or goes onto Kickstarter and is looking for a new mech game and sees this game, my game, versus a game like Lancer, the question should seem obvious to pick up my game, because it's cool and Lancer is lame. And so that's really where I'm kind of coming from on that. It's just, once you have these political statements at the beginning of a book, it kind of reveals your intentions as a creator, and it almost kind of corrupts the entire underlying thread of the project. Like, everything in the book must be seen through this lens now. And that's kind of the main reason why I dislike it. There's some rules, gameplay reasons too, but I don't have, it doesn't connect with me in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and something that Dunder brings up, and this is something we'll get to here in just a second, where it says kaiju are inherently evil. There is this tendency in many modern games, and Lancer is certainly one of them, where the monsters must be, some kind of misunderstood entity. It's not that they are representations of pure destruction and chaos or anything. No, these are heckin' good boy doggos, to use Reddit speak. They're going to be giant heckin' good boy doggos who can destroy cities, and it's only it's that whole there's no bad dog, only a bad owner type situation. It's your fault, people of Tokyo, that Godzilla continuously decides to wreck shop in your city. And this, to me, gets into the philosophical underpinnings of this particular genre, because with Mech, and this is coming from the perspective of someone who is essentially a tourist to this particular genre of science fiction. I'm not one of those Gundam mega fans. I'm
right.
Not some. I've seen Pacific Rim, and when I was 7, I would wake up early in the morning before school and watch Zoids at the very tail end of Adult Swim. That is my entire exposure to the mecha genre. So this is me looking at it from the outside. But what I see when I look at this particular genre, or what I see that it could be, is what you mentioned there. This essentially next step in human resilience and ingenuity. If the demons and the monsters and the forces of chaos are going to be this big and bad, then we as humanity have to buckle down and become this big and bad ourselves. We've got to come up with some kind of answer to this question. And one of my favorite shows that did this, that showed this in a cool way, I don't know if this is one that you're familiar with, but Big Guy and Rusty the Boy Robot from the early 2000s. That's what I think of when I see this. This Air Force pilot who essentially has decided to let his entire career be a secret behind him. He is going to take the reins of this mech, and he is going to beat back all the aliens that are trying to invade the United States. This is like the ultimate expression of this genre, and this is the kind of stuff that I think is really cool, and why I really dug a movie like Pacific Rim. What are your thoughts on this? I've been rambling here for a second. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, Pacific Rim puts it very succinctly, and it's one of the underlying themes of mecha, at least mecha versus kaiju. Now, just to preface that, when you get into something like Battletech or Gundam, it's mainly the political aspirations of different human factions that have just so happened to come across these super weapons that they now use to fight each other.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what it is. It's pure science fiction. The mechs are battleships. They're aircraft carriers of our time versus each other.
Yeah.
With nuclear weapons. But in Pacific Rim, he says, in order to fight monsters, we had to create monsters of our own.
Mm-hmm.
And the mechs are certainly monstrous. There's a reason why they have kind of this humanoid silhouette to them, but they're strange and uncanny, is that they represent kind of the animality or the monstrosity of humanity separated outward into this enormous war machine that can inflict levels of devastation unknown to humankind, but now humans are in control of it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if that's a little too philosophical, but I mean, that's really at the core of what a good portion of good mecha versus kaiju stuff is about. Now, if we want to go into the kaiju themselves in this game, with a sole exception, they are purely evil dragons that must be destroyed, and they were controlled by an evil alien race that wants to colonize the Earth, that unleashed them, and they're like the Terminator. They can't be bargained with. They can't be reasoned with. They do not feel pity, remorse, or fear, and they absolutely will not stop ever until humanity is dead. Right? It's the famous quote from Terminator. So how do you fight an enemy like that? You have to get the hardest, baddest military leaders, survivors, and put together all of humanity's ingenuity to fight back against something so threatening to civilization.
Yeah.
But coming out of Japan, the kaiju genre is very complex. And of course, we kind of had our own version of that with King Kong, which predates Godzilla by 20 years.
Yeah.
But Godzilla was what people usually associate it with. And people often say that Godzilla is a metaphor for nuclear weapons in Hiroshima. That's not entirely true. Godzilla is supposed to represent just the overall danger of scientific hubris, and that's in the movie. The main Japanese scientist has created this super weapon that's the only thing that can kill Godzilla, and he feels guilty for having created it, so he commits suicide at the end to prevent his device from falling into the wrong hands. That's a major theme. But then as it got more popular, Godzilla became friend to all children, and it became very, very ridiculous. And he has a son that breathes little cute puffs of smoke, and he's a heckin' cute doggo.
Yep.
And then they have to come up with other things for Godzilla to fight, because if he's friend to all children, he's not going to be going around chomping on children. So we have all the Godzilla rogue gallery of Mecha Godzilla and King Ghidorah and all the King Kong and all these other things that Godzilla has to fight. Yeah. And then it kind of comes full circle in the 80s, and the 90s, which is what I'm influenced the most by, where they came back and said, nope, Godzilla is pure evil. and there's a few movies where he's like super evil again, and they have to fight him, and he represents Japan's guilt for the atrocities they committed in World War II and like all this other stuff. So there's a lot of layers to what Godzilla was. He can be kaiju in general, can be what Alchemic Raker says. They're the personification of chaos. This is somewhat similar to how they are in Pacific Rim. They're like natural disasters, hurricanes or earthquakes.
Yeah.
That nevertheless can be stopped, but they don't necessarily have a malevolence to their action. They just destroy everything that they see. Or they can be pure evil, as I think Dundermoose is the one who said that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dundermoose said kaiju are pure evil. That's what they are here. In this game, it's described in the backstory that the kaiju seem to take glee and delight in watching humans suffer because they're an extension of this alien race that believes humanity is inferior and has to be wiped away from the surface of the planet like the ants that they are. And so the kaiju specifically seek out humans to kill them.
Yeah.
There can be nothing more evil than that. Like the kaiju aren't just there trundling along, blowing up buildings because they're big and can't control their own strength. They're there to kill humans, and that's what they do.
Yeah.
So, you would say there is a bit of law versus chaos, good versus evil at the core of this game, as there is in all of my game supplements, settings, whatever. I always have to have that as at least an underlying condition. Are all the pilots and heroes you're able to create in Titans of Fallen Earth, are they what you would consider lawfully good, or at least orderly heroes that are there purely for humanity's sake? No. And you might come across a badass like Snake Plissken, who kind of has a heart of gold, but he's like a badass and he'll do anything to complete the mission. Whether other people stand in his way or not, that's the type of character you can make. So it's not as cut and dry as classical fantasy, but there is still an underlying theme there to the bottom of Titans of Fallen Earth. But the one exception is that there is a class. Now, you can't pick up a game like this and not expect to play as the kaiju. That's one thing. That's one thing that all of the games in this genre are completely lacking, is your ability to play as some kind of heroic kaiju thing. And that is a thing in Japan with Ultraman. And there have been many type of heroic kaiju archetypes in anime, like Attack on Titan has some, and things. The Guyver would be an example of one. Things of that nature. So that is a character archetype class of Titan in the game that you can choose. Of course, if you have the power to turn into a kaiju and you are a person, you are essentially an outcast yourself, like the Incredible Hulk, Bruce Banner.
I was just about to bring that up. I was just about to say, would you consider the Incredible Hulk to be a somewhat heroic kaiju?
Yeah, a scientific experiment that doesn't necessarily want to commit the atrocities that he commits, and sometimes he has enough intelligence in some versions to have control of himself. But in the end, he's going to be a loner and outcast. People don't trust him. If his secret identity is revealed, the government might try to capture him to experiment on him, and that type of thing can happen with this Titan class in this game as well. Alchemic Raker has asked, so does Titans of Fallen Earth have both chaos and evil type kaiju? I would say no, because there's no alignment system in the game. But all the kaiju are kind of linked to mythological deities and monsters and concepts which could represent chaos. But to the ancients, to many of the ancient tribes of Europe and in Arabia and all these things, like a creature of chaos was in many ways also an evil creature that you were not to associate with. Right. So that the kaiju, even the most chaotic kaiju, are still going to be dangerously wicked and destructive in their ways and mannerisms.
Mhm. Yeah, and you see this play out in multiple different ways, kind of throughout humanity. Of course, there's Tiamat, and I'm not talking about D&D Tiamat. I'm talking about
Correct.
mythological Tiamat,
Yeah.
the goddess of essentially chaos and destruction, from Mesopotamia. You see this in the Tarask, again, the mythological Tarask, but you also see this play out in Lovecraft. Lovecraft was very when you look at what these elder gods actually are, they are uh, beings that are so vast and so big and so um otherworldly and alien that they basically it's not as if some of them do actually directly mean the world harm because they take great pleasure in it, but it's more just like you're in the way, you are insignificant speck to this thing, and so it's either going to maliciously swat at you because it thinks it's funny, or it's just going to trample on you on its way to something bigger beyond human comprehension.
Throughout human history, monsters that hunt us and kill us, like tigers and snakes and serpents, even biblically going back, especially snakes,
Mhm.
uh, creatures that are totally chaotic and hunt and kill us are almost indistinguishable from being evil to us anyway. I mean
Mhm.
that they don't have consciousness capable of a level of morality that would define them as evil, but to us, chaos and evil are indistinguishable in many instances.
Yep. And this even goes back to the core of horror, just as a genre. And I did not mean for this to be, synergizing with the season and Halloween. It just happened to shake out that way. Um, to read a little bit and elucidate on a theme that you brought up earlier about the first Godzilla movie. Those of you who have seen the title of the stream know, yes, I am a Blue Oyster Cult fan. To read the lyrics of that particular song that I'm referencing in my title, the outro to the song repeats repeatedly. History shows again and again how nature points out the folly of man. That couplet there, those two lines, essentially summarizes the entire horror genre, going all the way back to what I would say is its originator, which would be Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. That's the theme of Frankenstein, and that's the theme of really every single seminal horror text that comes out of Frankenstein. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Dracula. These are all stories where the monster is some kind of exaggerated aspect of human evil and represents what happens when uh, vice is left unchecked, sorry, or essentially like the id is left to run wild. That's what you get in so many of these stories, and kaiju are just another interpretation of this particular phenomenon. And so having the mech as a counterpoint to this, you're having to harness the destructive power of man and our capacity to basically do harm to each other and do harm to everything around us in a way that is repelling directly these forces. It's to put it another way, it is the destructive nature of violence versus the corrective nature of violence at war with each other in a direct struggle. It is violence run amok versus violence being used to impose order upon a chaotic world. That's the philosophical balance that I see in this particular matchup when you put a mech, which is a constructed, designed uh, entity, versus a kaiju, which is just this accident of nature or assembly of chaotic forces being weaponized against humanity. However you shake that out, you do have this constructed, purposeful uh, force of violence to restore and impose order versus violence run amok.
And there's also a theme of corruption in this game, which, you know me, I'm big on Tolkien style and, the fall. Things can be corrupted from their initial state and become evil.
Yeah.
For example, the Kaijin, who are the people who can transform into kaiju, begin as heroic. Perhaps they're super soldiers who think that they are able to save humanity with this power that they have volunteered to undertake. But there are tidbits in the character creation that describe that you slowly start to get withdrawal symptoms. You get with these characters are begin to miss being the monster, and they eventually start to slowly, their humanity starts to slip away, and they become more attached to the monster than they do their former selves, and much the same way as the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah.
So that's in there as well. And again, on the corruptible aspect of human created science, they took the humans in these factions have taken it upon themselves, because realistically you can't get an 80-meter tall robot to move on its own. That technology for that does not exist. Okay, so there's a bit of realism to this in a way. They decided to use kaiju muscle fibers grown in a lab, and sometimes they use like bits of kaiju organs and skeletal like bones and maybe even like brain stems to try and like build these enormous gigantic war machines. And the risk there is, what have you done? You've created this war machine which was an inanimate object, but you've imbued upon it some kind of life force or essence that should not be there. It does not belong there.
Yeah.
And Evangelion covers that as well. You may not have seen that anime, but
I haven't, unfortunately. But
yeah, eventually the giant robots are revealed to be like angels that they just strapped armor on top of to try and control.
Yeah.
And so it's like almost a similar thing going on here. The Titans might actually go berserk and attempt to take control over their pilots in certain scenarios. And so that's where you get your Frankenstein. He's creating life, but he didn't stop to think if he should. It's like the Ian Malcolm quote from Jurassic Park. Your scientists are so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Yeah.
So I enjoy all these type of themes and try to include, even though it is a comic booky 1980s retro themed action game with wargaming elements, I still enjoy including some of these themes there.
Yeah. And when you enter these worlds of science fiction, they're like, inevitably you do have to come up against some of these themes. And this idea of the fusion of humanity and technology, or trying to harness monstrous forces and in the service of good. You see consequences of this play out in lots of different fiction. I think immediately of something like Lawnmower Man, where the longer the not Pierce Brosnan, the other character whose name now escapes me, the longer he stays in the machine, the more it kind of subsumes who he is, and the more it changes what he is, and he becomes this kind of fusion type character where the machine has kind of taken over him. You also see this in Neuromancer. Certain characters like the Dixie Flatline, he's been completely taken over by the machine and now lives entirely inside cyberspace. So, these are elements that are essential, seminal to science fiction. This idea of when you tamper with the forces of nature, when you mess with technology beyond human comprehension, or when you try to fuse these things together, when you try to harness the chaos or the power that comes with innovation for the means of humanity, how long will it be, or how far are you able to go before these things turn back on you?
Can create interesting mission options in this game.
Yeah.
For example, what happens when a person who can transform into a kaiju wakes up in the middle of the night and decides he's no longer human and wants to crush, kill, and destroy?
Yeah.
And it's in the very heart of a major city. Like, how do you? That's a total disaster that you're gonna stuff.
Definitely. So let's pivot a little bit here and take a look at this particular book that we're talking about here, because taking a look at it, there's a lot here that's already done and finished. You've got almost like essentially a complete product here for people.
Yeah, it's 95% written, 98% laid out.
And from what we're seeing here, like this looks awesome. This is a very cool book. Is this layout that you've been doing yourself?
No, me and my co-author Frank, he handles all the layout videos and technical stuff, and I do all the writing, and I find the artists and I direct the artists. And I must pride myself on this. And not everyone can find good artists and give them good art direction, but I always do a good job with this. And this book has our best art yet.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the styles on display here are absolutely phenomenal. The aesthetic that you guys have gone for this, it's comic booky and it's a little bit manga, but it's not. I don't look at it and immediately read weeb shit like I do with so many things that kind of go for that direction. It's a very cool fusion of that comic book 4-color style with heroic fantasy art in a lot of ways, and this piece right here is a particularly good example of that.
Yeah, I mean, we go for we harken back to the 80s and 90s for our styles.
Yeah,
and I think of Akira in particular, which is a classic anime film that today, many years later, I think it's been 30 years at least since Akira came out, people today wouldn't even recognize it as anime. It doesn't even, it looks nothing like this weeb shit that you have today at all.
Yeah.
It's completely different. But back in the day, it was considered anime. And so that's our kind of our thought process here, is going back to the way things used to look and feel. And hopefully we were able to achieve that.
Yep. Yeah, and this is another thing I want to compliment you on, and Frank on as well. This style that you have here, this kind of screen style presentation, like this is something that would appear to you on your layout inside your mech as you're controlling, as you're getting like mission intel and stuff like that. There have been other games that have attempted this. What springs immediately to mind is Modiphius's Star Trek Adventures, that have tried to give this aesthetic, and it does not come off well. This does come off well. You get both the feeling that this is a book, it's readable text, it looks good, it's easy to follow, but it still has that hint, that essence of this would be the readout that I'm getting on my screen as I'm in the middle of battle. You can see the wireframe image of the kaiju with its, in its T pose next to like this text that you're seeing as you're, observing this monster from a distance. That's fantastic. It's great. I love it.
Yeah, that's kind of a retro, almost futurist approach there, but really our approach Frank's approach for layout was we wanted to have every single chapter in the book, whether it's a faction or a rules chapter, look and feel completely different and have its own identity and art style. That way, when you have the physical copy in your hand, the hardcover, you don't even need to look at the table of contents. You can tell just by flipping through what chapter you're on and what it's about.
Mhm. And even here we have some comic book style illustration and layout as well, which is it's cool to see that fusion. There are a couple examples I can think of where a graphic novel and a role playing game were fused together. The first one that comes to mind is there were some Dark Sun modules in
Yeah.
fourth edition, sorry, that attempted this. I think this does it better in my opinion.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, we wanted to give have like a little comic book at the very beginning of the story so that if you don't want to read through a bunch of dense lore, which I'm a fan of dense lore, but not everyone is, all you got to do is read through this story. You have the gist of what this whole setting and theme is about.
Yep. Yeah, this is all fantastic. And so
Yeah,
I can
that,
see what I see what you're saying here, because now you get into chapter 2 and you go from that readout type layout to this
apocalyptic fire type
yeah.
of thing. We've got some propaganda that the alien colonists like to spread around in a V type fashion. If you remember that classic show V.
Yep.
This is most of the lore of the game is in this chapter. Unlike my Iris book, which has like 80 pages of lore, this only has like much less than that, like 15. So you're not going to be inundated with stuff that you feel compelled to read here. Tells you about the present day again and kind of a cyberpunk, like, look and feel to it, like a computer feel.
Yep. More great art. You've talked about this on the show before, but for anyone who is unfamiliar with your work, how do you go about finding your artist? Because this can be stuff like this. It's actually somewhat hard to find people who are willing to draw machinery in particular.
Yeah, one thing is that I'm pretty lucky. I'll just be browsing Twitter and come across a guy that has like 50 followers and nobody knows who he is. But then I'll go to his website and he has a 500-page comic book that he made. And I'm like, why isn't this guy doing my book? And that's how I found LaFleur Zone, who's done 90% of the art in this whole book. And he draws mechs, machines, kaiju, people, everything. He'll do anything. So I got lucky with him. But for most of our stuff, what I like to do is I like to go on a place like ArtStation. And this is very specific advice. This is not general. I like to go to a place like ArtStation, search for a theme that I need an artist for. For example, I will type in Tolkien like fantasy or something like that. Just search for a theme. See the artists that pop up. There's a setting to filter away all the professional artists. So I get rid of them right away. And what I do is I look for people who seem talented and active, but they don't have a big follower count. Like they only have like 100 followers or 50 followers. Nobody knows who they are, but they are talented. And that's how I picked up a lot of my great artists. It's just like, hey, do you want to work on an RPG book? And they're like, heck yeah. And that's how it ends up.
Yep. And I'm working with people on my particular book. I'm working with people who were recommended to me or people who I found in an RPG context, because what I'm working on is closer to, standard RPG fare than what you have here. I don't have any robots to draw or any machinery or anything like that. But what I found is, you offer artists money. You're just like, hey, I am going to give you money. And they're like, oh, okay, all right, let's hear it.
That can work too.
Yeah.
Usually all I have to do is mention that this is for a role-playing game book, and they get the idea that they're going to be paid. Like, I don't have to tell them,
Yep.
here's how much I'll pay you. They can tell me that, and I'll tell them yes or no. But once they get the understanding that it's for like an actual real thing and it's not just some bullshit, they're more willing to go along. I'm especially proud of our world map here with the green, like, war games computer screen here. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, this is, get the XCOM vibe off of this. But yeah, like, when it comes to these artists, and this is the thing that kills me about this ever raging AI debate that we have in this hobby. People seem to think, because when you do a cursory search on somewhere like ArtStation, or God forbid, don't know why you'd be looking, DeviantArt. God help you if that's where you're going to find your sources. You can look through there and find, on the surface, on first glance, a lot of really bad, mediocre art, and think this is all that's out there. That's not true. There are very affordable, very talented artists who are not being used the way that they should be, whose work deserves to be seen out there, that you can just reach out to. All you have to do is dig just a little bit deeper. All you have to do is spend just a couple more minutes refining your search criteria, using the right resources to determine, who you're reaching out to, and you can find top flight talent that is just going unnoticed because everyone's like, "Oh, AI is free," and
they're being buried. It's really hard on a lot of artists. When I first started working on the Chronicles of Iris in 2021, AI was there, but it wasn't. It was a novelty. No one was using it like they are now. Now back then I could go on Google image search and just search for fantasy artwork, and none of it would be AI. It would just be, a varying quality, but you could find somebody even with that. But now, go on Google image search and search for cyberpunk art. You will hundreds and hundreds of pages of entries of art, and it's all AI, all of it.
Yeah,
like pages and pages and pages and pages that scroll down, and it's just absolutely ridiculous to me. Like, what has become of the culture of the West here, that we're destroying ourselves. But anyway.
But yeah, and that's one thing that I've always appreciated about your work, is you go out of your way to find not just, human artists who are willing to work, but actually like talented human artists that aren't getting the spotlight shown on them. There's lots of people who show up in a lot of people's books, and a lot of them are very talented, but you have this knack for finding really good people that seem to just kind of like fall through the cracks, which is something I really appreciate about all the work that you do. And you see it in this book too.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I know what I'm looking for. If I see art that's a Goran Gligovic, I'm going to message that guy right away, because he's what I'm looking for. He did all the art for Blades in the Dark. I think did he do Blades in the Dark? Maybe that was him. But anyway, he's going to be working on our next book. But
yeah, and say what you will about Blades in the Dark as a game, the art actually is very, very good.
Yeah, it's quite good. Goran's a good guy.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit to switch gears some, and I'll bring up a new screen here. With this project that is 95% finished, one thing that I really appreciate that you're doing here is this Kickstarter campaign is very straightforward. You are already funded. if we go down to the the rewards that you can get, there's nothing here that's insane. I'm not seeing any insane stretch goals that are going to just completely like break the back of your project. This is everything that I strive to be with my Kickstarter campaigns, and everything that I hope to carry forward moving forward. You've got stuff that is cool, that's interesting, but you're not out here trying to like graft on a whole miniatures line at like a $10,000 stretch goal or something like that. That's absolutely ridiculous and absurd.
Yeah, I tried to do that with the first Chronicles of Iris Kickstarter. I promised these stretch goals, and I almost bankrupted myself, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because the Kickstarter money was not enough to do what I wanted to do at all,
Mhm.
much less even ship the book. Forget about that. That came out of my own pocket. My stretch goal was the Rat Folk Adventure, Shadows of Padfoot Alley, which is an entire book. It's a whole book by itself, a whole adventure with all artwork and everything, like all by itself. And that was a stretch goal. Like, I'm never doing that again. Forget that.
Yep.
Even though that book ended up being our best-selling book. But still, hopefully that will be replaced with this one.
Mm-hmm. But what you do have here is a soundtrack, which I think is always a cool touch. How did this particular aspect come about?
Oh, it's easy. Easy for us, because as I'm working on the game, I'm listening to a lot of retro style synth, new retro wave. Mega Drive, who's in our trailer, I've actually licensed them. I listen to a ton of that stuff, and I'm like, well, Frank is a talented jazz musician. Why can't he do that? And so he's going to do it. We already have 2 Dungeon Synth albums out there in Bandcamp that were successful, so it's not going to be a big leap for him to do this. And he was willing to do it, and I think people will enjoy it. Because people, as story gamey as it may seem, there's nothing wrong with playing music during the game. I feel like it always adds a layer of fun and immersion to any role-playing game at the table.
Yeah, I'm of two minds about it, because the first time I ever played role-playing games was in a game store that had a whole lot of noise going on. And so part of that was music, part of it was, chatter from other tables. And so there's part of me that just gets really antsy and anxious when there's a lot of extra noise at the table.
Yeah, it's not really made to play at a local game store, to be honest. I mean, the music anyway. I remember I wouldn't do that. Bring my own little speaker and hook it up at the game store. Like, ugh, that's too much.
But in the right environment with the right table, having music that kind of meshes with the game world that you're playing in can be, it can certainly kind of bring things out of players. It can really inspire them. When that song comes on at just the right minute, it's hard to plan around that stuff, because again, we're not story gaming here. We want things to be immersive. But when like that song comes on at just the right moment, and you're like, yeah, all right, we are the best around, and nothing's gonna ever keep us down. That's a magical moment that can be created with having music at your table. It's just the one thing that I say is, if you have a chatty table, maybe don't have music.
Right. And our thought with this soundtrack is we have 3 factions that are very, very, very different. And their chapters in the book look different, and their mechs and titans are different. So we're going to have battle themes and non-combat themes for each faction. Each faction will have 2 battle themes that sound like the faction. They're not generic. It's going to have like themes and motifs. And so I think that'll add a little bit of cinematic quality to it, hopefully. I told Frank, I want this to sound like a PlayStation 1 game. I want it to sound like Metal Gear Solid. And he's like, okay, I can do that.
Sweet. Now, in addition to this, setting and world, this is a system that you have also designed yourself, and I've pulled this up here. Titans of Fallen Earth is using its own proprietary system. So tell us a little bit about Titan D6.
Sure. That was a challenge that I wanted to personally take on because I've always ever been tied to Dungeons and Dragons licenses or related type of systems. And I'm like, you know what? Nothing like that fits what this game is. I'm going to do something different. And it's been through a few iterations. Describes it on the Kickstarter there. For a while, we wanted to do a D100, and I had a lot of Rifts books, and I even looked at Mithras and a lot of percentage-based systems, and that had some downfalls that I wasn't ready for. So then I started looking into Western game Star Wars and getting a good feel for like dice pool. And that seemed to work, but it still wasn't quite there. So, the system was developed with inspirations in mind, of course. But I wanted to flesh out a D6 dice pool system that fit the theme and feel of the game at the table like other systems could not. And that's why I wanted to develop Titan D6. Instead of counting successes, it's an additive system. You're rolling a ton of dice and you're adding the numbers up. Pros and cons. It can be slower, but people like big numbers. They like rolling a lot of dice. If you're Godzilla shooting an atomic breath, you're going to want to roll a lot of dice and see those big numbers and get some exploding dice and stuff like that, and maybe even vaporize an enemy kaiju with your mech in one hit, just totally like shear his head off with a laser beam. It's possible in the game. So that's the kind of just overall direction I wanted to take with the rule system.
Yeah, and it really is important. Something that a lot of game designers don't put enough emphasis on. It's important to have your rules back up the setting that you are projecting, because it's one of those things you only notice when it's wrong. When it's right, it's it's harmonious, and it's not the system's not getting in the way of the fun you're having exploring this particular genre. But when it's wrong, when that alignment is off, you notice it. You notice that the system is keeping you from doing the cool things that you want to do in this particular world.
Yeah, I call this a Mecha versus Kaiju simulation. But that is a little misleading, because usually when you think of a simulation, you think of something very realistic and grounded. You're simulating the wind velocity of things and momentum and weather conditions and all that. What this game simulates is fiction. It's a simulation of fiction. When you put in Pacific Rim and you get to the scene where he picks up the oil tanker and uses it as a baseball bat to just completely smash the kaiju through a building, I wanted to design the system in such a way so that you didn't need rule of cool points or something stupid like that in order to accomplish that. The actual combat rules can be put together in such a way that you can recreate or simulate those cinematic experiences using rules mastery. And so I felt that that was important for the design.
Yeah. Yeah, and that expectation is always going to be there when you put something out there like this for players. They're going to hopefully pick up this game and want to be able to recreate things that they've seen in games or movies or TV shows or comics that they love. And so allowing players the latitude to do things like that, that's kind of the magic of emergent role playing, is when the player comes up with this harebrained idea, giving them a way to at least attempt it is, that's key to this whole player agency debate that happens so often. Is basically, does the game allow for you to think creatively, or do you have to stay specifically within these set parameters of what you can and cannot do? Which is one of the reasons why I'm not particularly a fan of a game like Pathfinder. Whereas something like this, it sounds like you've got that room for creativity where you can uh climb to the top of the Empire State Building and elbow drop the kaiju below you, or something like that. That
Yeah, I mean, I've seen games in this genre where the GM does it. Like the player has no, the player would be like, I want to do something cool to this kaiju or mecha or whatever, and the GM's like, okay, what your character does is he grabs the oil tanker and he picks it, and it's like the GM, what? Like that's not that's not what I want.
right.
And I want the player to be able to do it. I want the player to be like, all right, what are my surroundings? You're in a ruined dockside that used to have a lot of water, but it's dried up because it's after the apocalypse, and there are ruined buildings. Okay, I'm going to use this combat rule to pick up an abandoned oil tanker, which has this hit points according to the chart. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a heavy melee attack to swing. And, they actually can stitch together the combat rules to make it possible without some kind of just pro tag points or whatever, which exists. It really exists. I've seen it.
Mhm.
And it's frustrating to me to see that type of thing. But this game will not have those type of systems in it.
And honestly, I think that's the number one cause of what people have called in the past Mother May I gaming. It's not understanding, how much latitude do we have within the rules to do things like this. And so having a rule set that gives you that freedom, if that's, a freedom that you feel needs to be part of the game to make this system work, that's where you get the, well, can I do this? Because if your game's not built right, and I feel like this is a direct consequence of people who came up in the D20 era, where everything
Yeah.
tried to fit within 3E or 3.5E D&D. Can I actually do this thing? Well, yes, but it's extremely complicated, and you have to do this, this, and this. Whatever, I'll just hit it with my sword. Not having that barrier, I feel
Right.
like really eliminates that particular pain point in gaming. You don't have to ask me if you can do it. You just do it.
I wanted it to be simple and straightforward for most gamers, but complex if you're willing to put in the time to really delve into the rules and understand everything.
Yep.
Rules mastery, as I mentioned earlier. I could have been happy to just get the open source version of Weston Games D6 and just make the game on that. But there are things that you can't do in that game that I want to do in this game. It's not really designed for 80-meter tall robots fighting monsters or robots fighting mecha versus mecha. It's not designed for that.
Yep.
And so I kind of, I wanted to take it in a direction that made sense for this specific genre.
Yeah. Cool. Well, this thing has, let's take a look here at the top, 18 days to go. So you guys have plenty of time to jump on this. It is already fully funded. What are you looking at as far as kind of a rollout once this campaign is over? What can people expect once 18 days is up? If they back this, what does that look like for you at this point?
Well, we're doing more play testing. Patty Okegs has already done some with me on stream, and I was on his stream. We ran through a full character creation session from beginning to end. That went quite smoothly. So there might be some more play testing in our future for sure. But I could foresee the PDF being available before Christmas if everything goes quickly. and then we'll ship the physical book next year as it's coming from overseas, and then we have to import that and wait for it to ship from Lithuania, stuff like that. So it should be in your hands fairly quickly, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And what we have on screen right now, for those of you wondering, is the character sheet. He alluded to his stream with Patty where they created a character. So this is what you're kind of working with as far as a character sheet for this game, which, this thing looks cool. It's 2 pages. It's not overly long, but there's plenty of spots on here where you can see, there's a space for everything you think there would be a space for. There's great visualization of what, stats mean. I think this is a very good character sheet.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, for those of you who are watching and are curious, this is a type of game where damage is broken out by body part, or what we call them zones. So you can specifically attack the left leg or the right leg or the cockpit or something like that, just for an extra level of strategy. And you can assign your defense and hit points accordingly to bolster one area versus another. So that's what that little diagram there with those various zones are. Those are the zones that can have their own individual HP and all that you can attack.
Cool.
Malachi, I don't think old Trump's going to be targeting Lithuania. Lithuania is a pretty conservative country. As far as I know, they're up there with like Poland. I don't think they're anywhere in our president's sights when it comes to tariffs.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know that print goods are going to be anything that's, like a hefty tariff is going to be imposed on. When you're talking about tariffs, it's usually steel, electronic components, I think, are going to be a big part of it as well, just with trying to reshore manufacturing. I don't think books are going to be caught up in the maelstrom of what potential tariffs could be levied upon imported goods moving forward.
Yeah, we don't import paper products typically unless they're from China. Now that could change, which is why it's so perplexing, and I blame government inefficiency about the lack of toilet paper during the COVID pandemic. Yep. I don't think people realize that toilet paper is made in the United States. It's like exorbitantly expensive to transport something that heavy and bulky from another country.
Yep.
So why is there a shortage of it? Do we have a shortage of trees? No. So,
yep. Crazy world out there, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to discuss with you. Is there anything that you want to share with people that we didn't cover already?
I just made a tweet about this earlier today. Dunder Moose saw it. I did start writing a new section in our chapter for the Game Master on how to design missions for the game. And my new section is how to run Titans of Fallen Earth using independent actors operating under a fog of war. So, there's a Braunstein. So hopefully, I feel the game is quite capable of doing that. And we're going to have, it's a lot of wargaming aspects combined with role-playing aspects. And I want the GM to be able to meld his campaign and his missions accordingly. So that's where we're going to go. So if you're expecting just a cinematic RPG where you're an anime girl walking around a city trying to pick up anime bros and like date them, that's not what this game is at all. Right. Yes, there is downtime where you might be able to explore a little bit, but 90% of the game is heavy and hard-hitting action on a theater of war in the battlefield, with an expanding theater of war and a fog of war and multiple factions to compete. So yeah, that's what we're about.
Well, and if you wanted to take a Braunstein approach to this particular genre, I mentioned it earlier, but XCOM is a good example of how to do that, where in XCOM, you have to obtain funding from certain countries or certain governments to keep your project afloat, and if you aren't honoring the terms of the agreement that you set, or your missions are failing more often than they're succeeding, your backers will start to pull away from you, and you're going to lose access to the funding and manpower and material that you were getting from that relationship. So there's all kinds of cool stuff that you can do in that regard. When it comes to the faction play element of this genre.
And there's also a very heavy military-based aspect to it. Of course, most characters, although there are some instances where you can do things on your own as like a wasteland marauder, like a Mad Max type of character. Most of the time, you're going to be a veteran or someone with a military background with a chain of command that you have to adhere to. If you go into battle with an $80 billion giant robot that there's only 2 in existence, and you come back and it's all destroyed because you were reckless, you might be court-martialed.
Yeah.
So stuff like that you can consider. I'd like for you to pull the book up, if you don't mind, real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
And scroll to page 81.
81. Let's go ahead and pull that up here. It does not want me to show that for some reason. Something with the PDF. Go ahead and just try to get that going. While we're doing that, Beowulf here has a question for you as I'm trying to get this to pull up. You mentioned mech versus mech combat, but would it be possible to have vehicles such as battleships or PR carriers? Basically, how would you simulate Mobile Suit Gundam with this game?
That's kind of why I wanted to pull up that picture, because it's a full-page illustration of an enormous kaiju like underwater. And there's a reason why there are no battleships or submarines in the game. It's because there's these things in the ocean that can chomp a submarine in half in one bite. But for a more practical explanation, this is a post-apocalyptic game where humans have been at war with these things for like 5 years or so. So they've kind of come to realize that tanks, planes, bombs, battleships, jets are not really that effectual. That's why we have the Titans. So no, we typically are not going to have rules for battleships, carriers, things like that. Airplanes, helicopters, not in the game. But
there
you can
go.
Yeah. There is. That monster.
That is awesome looking.
But you can simulate those kinds of battles by customizing your Titan. There's underwater combat. Titans can fly. They have jetpacks. You can have drones that detach and do reconnaissance and surveillance. There's a lot of different options for customization that can give you different gameplay experiences.
Mm-hmm. And to answer Levi Combs' question here from Planet X Games, I was drinking Old Hickory Bottled and Bond. I am now out of it, but that's what I was drinking tonight. So,
more.
But yeah, this right here, like that's just amazing. I love stuff like this. This is cool.
Yeah, it's dope. There might even be a mission where you have to go underwater with specially outfitted submersible Titans to try and hunt down and find this thing and try and kill it. Yep. And that could be like some serious submarine combat right there.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and the ocean is scary as hell. So yes. There's that. That's always a consideration.
Oh, we got a lot of sick art in the book, Beowulf. There's no question about that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't print out or export a copy of our Kaiju chapter for Ryan today. But we do have a bestiary, and each Kaiju in the bestiary has full page artwork. We're not talking about just a little dude, off to the side, like a full page, full color, like artwork of this monster. So it's really dope. I can't wait for people to see it.
Hmm. And just as we are kind of reaching the end of our time here, I do want to remind everyone this is currently on Kickstarter with 18 days to go. The link is here in chat right now. If you're watching this after the fact, you will find it in a comment below the video that I will pin. The project, once again, is Titans of Fallen Earth, a Kaiju versus Mecha role-playing game, already fully funded, already 90% done. So you will be receiving your product. There is no concern about that whatsoever. Greg, congratulations on fully funding this thing. It looks dope as hell. People seem to really be enjoying it. I know this is a passion project of yours that you've been working on for at least a couple years at this point.
Yeah.
So, it's really cool to see this coming to fruition.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate you having me talk. I don't ever get to talk about like the themes and stuff, so that's good too. When people want to go back and listen to that, I would encourage it. But we've designed this game to appeal to RPG players, war gamers, BattleTech, with miniatures on a combat board. It appeals to Godzilla fans, anime fans, 80s fans. We have a wide audience, which is surprising to me why I'm not at 200,000. Maybe it's because I don't have a pronoun box on my character sheet. But anyway, tell your friends about it and make sure to support because we still have about 3 weeks left and I would appreciate it.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for Rollin Bones this evening. Next week, I am going to have P. Alexander, the person who co-authored and finished my article in Browser. You may know him from Sirsova magazine. He and I are going to be talking about something a little bit different from usual. We're going to be talking about RPG Lit, the cancer that is upon the literature world. There's a lot of weird, interesting concepts to discuss there. It's something I've been fascinated by for a while now. And so he and I are going to have an in-depth discussion on that. I'm looking forward to that conversation. Until next time, go back this on Kickstarter, follow the links that I'll be posting. Let's get this thing up to 200,000 if we possibly can. This is a worthy project. So let's do all we can to boost that here. And until next time, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I'm so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, and I will see you all on the other side. Have a good night.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.